Imagine inheriting a multimillion-dollar empire by orchestrating the brutal murder of your own husband. In today's true crime story, a wealthy tycoon's life is snuffed out, all for the greed of his ambitious wife. What seems like a tragic robbery gone wrong is soon uncovered to be a carefully planned execution orchestrated by someone closest to him, a woman who had everything to gain. Miranda Pierce was a woman who captivated everyone she met. At 45, she had an air of sophistication that masked her modest roots. Her sharp wit and undeniable charm had allowed her to rise from a small-town sheriff to the wife of Thomas Wilder, one of the wealthiest real estate moguls in the country. Theirs was a marriage that seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Thomas Wilder, 65 years old, was a man who had seen the highest peaks and darkest valleys of life. Born into poverty, he worked tirelessly to build his fortune, starting with small rental properties and growing his empire into a sprawling network of luxury estates, hotels, and skyscrapers. He had weathered storms, including the devastating loss of his first wife, who had been his partner in both life and business. Her death left a void in his life, but his determination to honor her memory by continuing their shared vision pushed him forward. When Thomas met Miranda, he was drawn to her vitality and intelligence. To the world, Miranda seemed to be his second chance at happiness, a woman who could bring light back into his life. Together, they lived in a sprawling mansion on the edge of a picturesque estate, complete with marble floors, glittering chandeliers, and a view that stretched for miles. But while the mansion was a beacon of wealth and success, it was also the stage for something far more sinister. Beneath the polished surface of their lives lay tension and secrets. Miranda, though adored by many, had a streak of ambition that made her a force to be reckoned with. For her, the mansion was not just a home. It was a trophy, a symbol of how far she had come. As we reflect on this real-life story, subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button, and let us hear from you in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's continue. Neighbors and friends often spoke of how perfect the couple seemed. Thomas was generous and kind, while Miranda was radiant and engaging. Together, they hosted extravagant parties filled with powerful figures and celebrities. But behind the scenes, cracks began to form. Miranda's charm often masked her impatience with Thomas, whose age and health were starting to catch up with him. The luxurious dinners, sparkling jewelry, and glamorous trips could not cover up the growing distance between them. Thomas, ever the pragmatic businessman, had begun to sense that his wife's interest in him might not be entirely genuine. And Miranda? Her eyes had started to linger on his fortune, wondering what life might look like if she had it all to herself. From the outside, no one could suspect that behind the grandeur of the Wilder mansion, a plan was beginning to take shape. A plan that would end in betrayal, blood, and shocking revelations. The crime scene was one of opulence turned macabre. Thomas Wilder was found slumped over the mahogany desk in his grand home office, a space that reflected his success. His body bore the brutal marks of violence, 2 gunshot wounds to the chest and clear signs of a vicious beating. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the Persian rug that once added charm to the room. Miranda Pierce, dressed in a silk robe, was found crumpled in the hallway outside the office, sobbing uncontrollably as she called the police. Her voice, filled with panic, echoed through the mansion. It was a robbery. They killed him. Oh my God, they killed him. When the police arrived, they found Miranda shaking, her hands clutching her phone. Her tear-streaked face and trembling voice painted a picture of a devastated widow. She claimed she had been upstairs when she heard the commotion and had come down only to find Thomas's lifeless body in the office ransacked. The initial assumption was straightforward, a robbery gone wrong. But as investigators examined the scene, they quickly noticed something didn't add up. Thomas's prized possessions, including a collection of antique watches and rare artifacts, remained untouched. The safe in the office, which contained cash and sensitive documents, was locked and undisturbed. Even Thomas's expensive watch and wedding ring were still on his body. The signs of a robbery were conspicuously absent. Then came the most perplexing detail: the mansion's state-of-the-art security system. The system, which was known to be impenetrable, had been deactivated shortly before the time of the murder. There was no sign of forced entry, and the cameras that should have captured every moment of the supposed intruder's movements were conveniently offline. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. Miranda claimed she had been asleep when the incident occurred, only waking up to the sound of gunshots. However, her story began to crumble under scrutiny. Neighbors reported no signs of a break-in or unusual activity around the mansion that night. Furthermore, Miranda's behavior seemed oddly composed once the initial hysteria faded. She cooperated with the investigators, but always seemed to steer the narrative back to the robbery. The investigation gained momentum as forensic teams combed through the house. Fingerprints on the gun used to kill Thomas didn't match any known criminals in the database. What they did find, however, was chilling: gunpowder residue on the inside of Miranda's closet. It was as if someone had attempted to clean up hastily but overlooked the traces. Then there were Miranda's actions leading up to the crime. The police uncovered a series of text messages exchanged between her and an unknown number, discussing financial arrangements and cryptic plans. One message read, "It has to be tonight. No mistakes." Detectives also discovered that Miranda had recently inquired about Thomas's will. A call to his attorney revealed she had expressed concerns about whether she was the sole beneficiary. The deeper they dug, the more troubling the inconsistencies became. Miranda had no explanation for why she had deactivated the security system earlier that evening. She claimed it was a mistake, but her excuse failed to convince the lead investigator, Detective Ethan Graves. Graves, a seasoned detective with a sharp intuition for deception, began focusing his attention on Miranda. He noted her tendency to deflect questions and her overly dramatic recounting of events. Her tears seemed rehearsed, her grief oddly performative. "I do hope you have subscribed already, as it is about to get really interesting." As the investigation unfolded, the narrative of a random robbery unraveled. Instead, the evidence pointed to something far more sinister: a crime born of greed and betrayal, with Miranda Pierce at the center of it all. The initial police response to the crime was swift and thorough, given the high-profile nature of the victim. A team of investigators, led by seasoned Detective Ethan Graves, arrived at the Wilder mansion within minutes of Miranda's frantic call. The scene they encountered was both gruesome and perplexing. The first assumption was that it was a robbery gone wrong. The shattered calm of the luxurious mansion, combined with Miranda's hysterical demeanor, seemed to support this theory. Reporters quickly gathered outside the estate, drawn by whispers of a tragic murder in one of the wealthiest households in the region. Miranda, wrapped in a blanket and seated in the living room, was surrounded by officers taking her statement. Her voice cracked as she recounted the events, claiming she had been upstairs when the sound of gunshots jolted her awake. Rushing downstairs, she said, she found Thomas dead in the office in disarray. Detective Graves watched her closely. While her tears seemed genuine, her demeanor felt off. Miranda oscillated between grief and defensiveness, repeatedly emphasizing the idea of a robbery without being prompted. "They killed him for money," she said, her voice trembling. "Who else would do such a thing?" As the forensic team began their work, a picture of the crime scene emerged. They found no signs of forced entry. The security system, which could only be deactivated from within the house, had been switched off shortly before the murder. Valuable items, including expensive watches, jewelry, and cash, were untouched. These details immediately cast doubt on Miranda's robbery claim. The detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the surrounding area. While the Wilder Estate's cameras had been disabled, cameras from neighboring properties revealed no suspicious activity. No one had entered or exited the premises during the time Miranda claimed the murder occurred. The first major clue came from Thomas's financial records. Upon examining his bank statements, investigators discovered that Miranda had recently withdrawn $4 million from an offshore account. The transaction was flagged as unusual, given that Thomas had never mentioned such a withdrawal to his financial advisors. Detective Graves and his team began piecing together the timeline. They discovered that Miranda had contacted the security company a week prior to the murder, requesting a temporary deactivation of the system for maintenance. The request had been odd, but the company complied, unaware of the sinister plan behind it. Meanwhile, interviews with staff and acquaintances painted a more complex picture of Miranda. The housekeeper mentioned overhearing heated arguments between the couple in the weeks leading up to Thomas's death. A close friend of Miranda revealed that she had recently expressed frustration with Thomas's health problems, calling him a burden. As the investigation deepened, another key figure emerged, a man named Victor Hale, a former convict with ties to Miranda. Text messages between Miranda and Victor hinted at a secret relationship. One particularly damning message read, "You'll get your share once it's done. No loose ends." Detective Graves and his partner, Detective Sarah Lang, confronted Miranda with this evidence during a second round of questioning. Her demeanor shifted. The once distraught widow became defensive and evasive. She claimed Victor was an old acquaintance who had reached out for financial help, dismissing the messages as harmless. But the detectives weren't convinced. They obtained a warrant to search Miranda's private accounts and devices. What they found was incriminating. Encrypted emails discussing payouts, detailed instructions about the security system, and even a life insurance policy that named Miranda as the sole beneficiary of Thomas's $20 million fortune. By now, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. Miranda's withdrawal of $4 million, coupled with her connection to Victor Hale and her suspicious behavior, pointed to a premeditated crime. Graves and Lang worked tirelessly to solidify their case, knowing that Miranda's high-profile status and wealth would make prosecution challenging. Tension built as they uncovered more. A neighbor reported seeing a black SUV parked near the estate the night of the murder, a vehicle later traced to Victor Hale. Phone records placed Victor's cell near the mansion at the time of the crime, further linking him to the scene. As the investigation progressed, Miranda's polished facade began to crack. She became less cooperative, dodging questions and attempting to discredit the detectives. The media frenzy around the case grew, with public opinion divided between those who saw Miranda as a grieving widow and those who suspected her of orchestrating the crime. Detective Graves, undeterred by the pressure, pursued every lead with precision. By the time they reached the midway point of the investigation, it was clear. The murder of Thomas Wilder was no random act of violence, but a meticulously planned betrayal by the person he trusted most. As the investigation advanced, Detective Graves and his team began to poke significant holes in Miranda's carefully constructed story. Her alibi, initially solid, began to unravel under closer scrutiny. Miranda had claimed she was at a high-profile charity gala for the majority of the evening before returning home to discover the crime scene. Eyewitness accounts and time-stamped photographs from the event supported her presence at the gala, at least at first. But then came a crucial discovery. Security footage from the venue showed Miranda slipping out through a side exit just over an hour before the murder was believed to have occurred. She wasn't seen returning to the gala until much later, her demeanor composed and her excuses ready. When questioned about this gap in time, Miranda claimed she had felt unwell and stepped out for air before deciding to return home early. However, cell phone tower data contradicted her story. It placed her phone near the Wilder mansion during the critical time frame, a fact that Miranda couldn't explain away. The once solid alibi was now riddled with holes, raising more suspicion. Adding to the intrigue was a new name that surfaced during the investigation, Derek Blackwell. Known in law enforcement circles as a hired gun with a reputation for executing high-stakes jobs, Blackwell had managed to evade capture for years. His name appeared in Miranda's phone records, buried among encrypted messages and calls placed in the weeks leading up to Thomas's murder. Detective Lang took the lead in tracing Blackwell's movements. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed a man matching Blackwell's description purchasing items the night of the murder, less than a mile from the Wilder estate. He was driving a black SUV, the same vehicle neighbors reported seeing near the mansion. Graves and Lang dug deeper into Miranda's connection with Blackwell. A forensic analysis of her financial records revealed several large cash withdrawals in the months preceding the murder. These transactions, totaling nearly $500,000, were funneled into an untraceable account that investigators linked to Blackwell. Piece by piece, the picture of premeditation began to form. Miranda's actions in the weeks before the murder were methodical and deliberate. She had contacted the security company to arrange for the system to be temporarily deactivated under the guise of maintenance. She had attended the charity gala to create a public alibi, ensuring witnesses could place her away from the mansion. And she had wired money to Derek Blackwell, setting the stage for the final act. The detectives also uncovered chilling evidence of Miranda's meticulous planning in her digital communications. Emails, texts, and notes on her tablet outlined every step of the scheme, from timing the security system's deactivation to coaching Blackwell on how to make the crime appear like a robbery. One message stood out: leave no trace. It has to look messy but random. Blackwell's role became clearer as investigators pieced together his movements. He had arrived at the estate shortly after Miranda slipped out of the gala, using a spare key Miranda had provided. Inside the mansion, he confronted Thomas in his office, delivering a brutal beating before pulling the trigger. The crime was meant to be quick and convincing, a staged robbery that would deflect suspicion. But Blackwell underestimated the forensic capabilities of the investigative team. Tiny fragments of a latex glove found at the scene matched a box recovered from Blackwell's apartment. Additionally, soil on his boots matched the rare type found in the Wilder Estates gardens. As the detectives zeroed in on Blackwell, they also began unraveling Miranda's motives. Interviews with Thomas's attorney revealed a recent change in his will, one that Miranda had pushed for. In the updated version, Miranda stood to inherit the entirety of Thomas's estate, a fortune worth tens of millions of dollars. The motive for murder was clear, but the unraveling of Miranda's intricate web was far from over. Just when the detectives thought they had the full picture, new discoveries emerged. Blackwell, once elusive, was finally located in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. His arrest added a dramatic twist to the case. During his interrogation, Blackwell, a man known for his cold demeanor, surprised everyone by implicating Miranda. He admitted to being hired by her, describing their secret meetings and her cold, calculated instructions. She wanted it done clean, but she didn't care about the mess, Blackwell confessed. She just wanted him gone. This bombshell confession added another layer to the case. Miranda, who had portrayed herself as a grieving widow, was now being painted as the mastermind behind a ruthless murder-for-hire plot. The suspense thickened as detectives prepared to confront her with the evidence, knowing this would be the turning point in their pursuit of justice. The investigation reached a critical turning point when detectives unearthed a trove of digital communications that sealed Miranda's fate. Among her emails, they discovered detailed exchanges with Derek Blackwell, the hitman she had hired. These communications revealed not only her explicit instructions, but also her cold and calculated mindset. One email in particular caught the investigators' attention. Ensure it's done cleanly. No witnesses, no loose ends. Make it look like a botched robbery. I'll take care of the rest. Attached to the email was a floor plan of the Wilder mansion, with Thomas's office highlighted in red, a chilling indication of the premeditation involved. Miranda had even gone so far as to discuss contingencies with Derek in case things went wrong. In one text, she wrote, "If you're caught, you keep your mouth shut. The money will reach your family regardless." These messages left no room for doubt. Miranda had meticulously planned her husband's murder and enlisted Derek to execute the crime. The final nail in the coffin came with Derek Blackwell's arrest. When detectives raided the rundown motel where he was hiding, they found him sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by remnants of his hurried escape, a half-packed bag, discarded burner phones, and stacks of cash. At first, Derek maintained his silence during interrogation, but the pressure mounted as Detective Graves laid out the evidence: the security footage, the fingerprints, the bank transactions, and the damning communications with Miranda. Finally, under the weight of undeniable proof, Derek cracked. "She paid me," he admitted, his voice low but steady. $4 million upfront. Half was wired to an account I set up. The rest was cash. He described how Miranda had approached him months earlier, framing her request as a necessary evil. "She said she was trapped," Derek continued. "She told me he was controlling, abusive. She made it sound like she had no choice. But the way she talked about money, it wasn't desperation. It was greed." Derek's confession painted a vivid picture of Miranda's role in the crime. He detailed their meetings, the rehearsals, and the meticulous planning. He explained how she had given him access to the house, deactivated the security system, and timed the event perfectly to coincide with her alibi at the gala. "She wanted it done fast," Derek said. "I was supposed to rough him up a bit, make it look like a robbery gone wrong. But when he fought back, I had no choice. She didn't care how it ended, as long as he was dead." Despite this damning confession, Miranda vehemently denied her involvement when confronted. Summoned to the station for questioning, she remained composed, her demeanor icy yet confident. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm being set up. Someone is trying to frame me because I'm the beneficiary. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this sounds?" Detective Graves presented her with the emails and messages, the financial transactions, and Derek's confession. Miranda's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "These messages could have been fabricated," she insisted. "I didn't hire anyone. I loved my husband. Why would I want him dead?" Her denial only fueled the tension in the room. Graves leaned in, his voice calm but firm. "You were the only one who stood to gain from Thomas's death. The money, the estate, the power, it all pointed back to you. And now we have Blackwell's testimony. The evidence is overwhelming, Miranda." But Miranda clung to her story. She claimed that Derek Blackwell was lying to save himself, that the emails were doctored, and that she had nothing to do with Thomas's murder. The confrontation lasted hours. Each revelation met with Miranda's unwavering insistence of innocence. Yet, beneath her confident exterior, cracks began to show. Her responses grew more defensive, her composure slipping as the weight of the evidence bore down on her. By the end of the interrogation, one thing was clear. Miranda was backed into a corner, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the pressure. The detectives had everything they needed to bring her to justice, but Miranda's denial hinted at a deeper game, one she wasn't ready to give up just yet. The trial of Miranda Pierce became a national sensation, with reporters lining the courthouse steps each morning and news outlets broadcasting daily updates. Dubbed the widow's betrayal, the case captivated the public, who were eager to see how the once-respected socialite would fare under the weight of damning evidence. In the courtroom, Miranda's carefully curated public image began to unravel. No longer the polished and poised grieving widow, she now appeared guarded, her steely gaze betraying the fear behind her defense. Her high-priced legal team attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, portraying her as a loving wife who was being wrongfully accused. The defense argued that Miranda had been framed. They suggested that Derek Blackwell, a known criminal, was lying to save himself, manipulating the evidence to implicate her. They also questioned the authenticity of the emails and texts, implying they could have been fabricated. But the prosecution's case was airtight. District Attorney Lydia Carter opened with a powerful statement. Asterisk, this case isn't about grief, it's about greed. Miranda Pierce didn't just want to inherit Thomas Wilder's fortune. She meticulously planned his murder to ensure it. Asterisk, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. Derek Blackwell's detailed confession was played in court, painting Miranda as a cold mastermind of the crime. The jury heard how she had manipulated Blackwell into carrying out her plan, using both money and emotional coercion. Financial experts testified about the $4 million withdrawal and the trail leading to Blackwell's account. Digital forensic specialists demonstrated how the emails and texts linking Miranda to the crime were genuine, silencing the defense's claims of forgery. One of the most powerful moments came when a forensic analyst described the floor plan of the mansion found in Miranda's emails. The jury saw the red circle around Thomas's office, a chilling reminder of the premeditated nature of the crime. The emotional toll of the trial was palpable, especially for Thomas's estranged son, Kyle Wilder. Kyle, who had remained distant from his father for years, was thrust into the spotlight as he wrestled with his emotions. He had always viewed Miranda with suspicion, but the trial forced him to confront the devastating reality of her betrayal. During his testimony, Kyle described his father's generosity and how Miranda had manipulated him. "My father trusted her," Kyle said, his voice cracking. "He believed she loved him. To see how she repaid that trust, it's devastating." His words struck a chord with the jury, emphasizing the depth of Miranda's treachery. As the trial progressed, Miranda's facade began to crack. She grew visibly agitated during cross-examinations, particularly when confronted with the damning evidence. Her attempts to feign innocence were met with skepticism from the jury, who watched as the prosecution meticulously dismantled her defense. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments were made. The defense continued to plead Miranda's innocence, claiming the prosecution's case relied too heavily on the testimony of a career criminal. But the prosecution's closing was devastating. This was not a crime of passion or desperation. D.A. Carter told the jury. This was a calculated, cold-blooded act. Miranda Pierce chose money over love, greed over loyalty, and murder over morality. Please, my beloved family person with praying hands, don't forget to subscribe to our True Crime channel so that you won't miss the next thrilling story coming up next. Thank you as you do so. Now let's continue. The jury deliberated for 3 days, the tension in the courtroom palpable as everyone awaited the verdict. Finally, the foreman stood to deliver their decision. We find the defendant, Miranda Pierce, guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps echoed through the room as the sentence was read. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Miranda's stoic expression faltered as the weight of the verdict settled in. For the Wilder family, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but the emotional scars remained. Kyle Wilder, speaking to reporters outside the courthouse, summed up the tragedy. My father deserved better. He trusted someone who saw him as nothing more than a paycheck. Today, justice was served, but it won't bring him back. As Miranda was led away in handcuffs, the courtroom emptied, leaving behind an air of finality. The trial had exposed not just a shocking crime, but the depths of human greed and betrayal. For all involved, it was a stark reminder that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. In the aftermath of the trial, Miranda Pierce's life became a grim shadow of what it once was. The lavish lifestyle she had curated, the social circle she had charmed, and the wealth she had coveted were all gone. Her public image, a glamorous widow adored by many, was now synonymous with greed, betrayal, and murder. News outlets chronicled her dramatic fall from grace, dissecting every detail of the trial. Once celebrated as a brilliant, driven woman who had risen from humble beginnings, Miranda was now vilified as a cold-blooded murderer. Former friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, her name becoming a cautionary tale whispered at high society gatherings. Inside the walls of the penitentiary where she would spend the rest of her life, Miranda found herself utterly alone. The woman who once wielded power and influence was now just another inmate, stripped of the luxuries and status she had once taken for granted. Her attempts to appeal the conviction were met with unanimous rejection. The evidence was too overwhelming, the crime too heinous. As the years passed, Miranda's story faded from the headlines, her notoriety replaced by the quiet monotony of life behind bars. For those who had been closest to Thomas Wilder, the healing process was slow and painful. His son, Kyle, worked to preserve his father's legacy, donating much of the family fortune to causes Thomas had cared about deeply. "My father believed in building, not destroying," Kyle said during a dedication ceremony for a housing project named in Thomas's honor. I want his memory to reflect the good he did in this world. The emotional impact of the case lingered, not just for the Wilder family but for the community that had once admired Miranda. Her story became a stark reminder of how unchecked ambition and greed can corrupt even the most promising lives. As time passed, documentaries, books, and podcasts revisited the case, each offering its own analysis of Miranda's motives and the choices that led her to orchestrate such a heinous act. One psychologist interviewed for a retrospective posed a haunting question. Did Miranda ever love Thomas, or was he always just a means to an end? We may never know. The story of Miranda Pierce served as a chilling reflection on the dark side of human ambition. It wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about the lengths someone could go to in their relentless pursuit of more. The final moments of the narrative lingered on Miranda's transformation, from a celebrated figure to a pariah, from a woman who seemingly had everything to one who lost it all. Her ambition, once admired, had consumed her. In the end, it left her with nothing but regret and isolation, and as the story concluded, the haunting question remained. What is the true cost of ambition? For Miranda Pierce, it was everything: her freedom, her reputation, and her humanity. A chilling reminder that, sometimes, the greatest enemies lie within. As the story of Miranda Pierce comes to a close, we're left with more questions than answers. What truly drove her to commit such a heinous act? Was it greed alone, or did something deeper, perhaps her upbringing, her insecurities, or her lust for power, play a role in her descent into darkness? What do you think? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Was Miranda purely motivated by greed, or is there a more complex story behind her actions? Could this tragedy have been avoided, or was it inevitable given her ambition? Let us know your theories. We'd love to hear them. For those fascinated by tales of betrayal, manipulation, and the dark side of human nature, make sure to stick around. If this story left you intrigued, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. We have more chilling true crime stories coming your way. And for our next episode, we'll delve into a case even more twisted. A web of lies spun by someone trusted by an entire community. How does a beloved figure turn into a villain? Stay tuned to find out. The story of Miranda Pierce reminds us of the lengths some will go to for power and wealth, and the irreversible damage left in their wake. As we sign off, we leave you with one final thought. What price would you pay for ambition, and at what point does success become a dangerous obsession?